Ja'far ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu posed to the Qurayshi delegates, and how they were proved wrong and their efforts to gain the custody of the Muslims in Abyssinia who had migrated there. They failed miserably at this attempt, and they lost all hope, even though they tried to flip the narrative upon the Muslims, and how Ja'far radiallahu ta'ala anhu very eloquently and very beautifully answered all of the claims and attempts they were making against them. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we'll be talking about the very significant event of one of the most renowned Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. And this Sahabi radiallahu ta'ala anhu, accepting Islam, turned the tide for the Muslims in a very, very big way. The Sahaba the Muslims at the time, prior to the Islam of this Sahabi, were unable to pray in Masjid al-Haram. In the courtyard of the Kaaba, the Haram, they were unable to pray within it without having some type of harassment, without having some type of prosecution, some type of difficulty come their way. It was very difficult for them. To a point we hear in the Seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that once the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself was in the state of sajda, and Abu Jahl, along with his courtiers, along with his his buddies, came and they dumped a huge amount of camel intestines upon the back of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As we know, camels, in terms of weight, are very heavy, and of course, the insides of a camel would also be very heavy. So due to this, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was unable to come back up from sajda. Because of the weight of just the intestines of the camel, the insides of the camel, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was unable to lift himself up from sujood. Right? And Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, came running, crying, and trying her best to remove this off of his back. Right? So these are the types of harassment and difficulties the Sahaba were facing within the Haram. They were unable to pray there peacefully. But due to this particular companion of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepting Islam, it turned the tide in the favor of the Muslims. It turned the tide into the favor of the Muslims in terms of being able to pray openly. And this Sahabi radiallahu anhu would not only keep his Islam concealed, but rather would go out and about and telling people, I've accepted Islam. He would go out and about and telling people that I have accepted Islam, and he would say it loud and proud. This was none other than Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu's story to Islam is very, very unique and it's very intriguing, because he himself would say that I used to be the most bitter enemy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prior to my Islam, prior to accepting the message of Allah, message of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, through Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I was the most bitter enemy against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I had nothing but enmity in my heart towards him. But subhanallah, this very enmity that he had flipped and became love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Flipped and became undying love for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How did he come into the fold of Islam? Right? One thing we'll notice that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for Umar radiallahu anhu. Right? The Messenger, and depending on the narrations, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allahumma a'izzal Islama bi ahadi umrayn. Allahumma a'izzal Islama bi ahadi umrayn. Who are the two Umars? So the translation of this is, Oh Allah, give Islam prestige, grant Islam izzah, grant Islam respect by the accepting of it through one of the two Umars. One Umar was, of course, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. The other one was Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl's real name was Umar bin Hisham. Abu Jahl's real name was Umar bin Hisham. Now, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam made this dua for one of the two Umars. In some narration it comes that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was divinely told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, divinely related to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through wahi, that the Islam of Abu Jahl will not take place. The Islam of Abu Jahl, meaning Abu Jahl accepting and coming into the fold of Islam, would not take place. So there was this bounty at the time put out that if there's an individual who na'udhu billah, exterminates and eliminates Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the person who put this out was Abu Jahl. if a person kills Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he will be granted 100 camels or 100 livestock. It was a big amount of money. Usually, I'm sure everyone knows what a bounty hunter is. Right? A bounty hunter, there's something put on the wallahu alam, on the black market, or some type of hit that's put. Whoever gets this job done will receive, in lieu of this job, XYZ amount of money. So in that time, this much livestock or this many camels or this many goats or whatever it was worth a lot. So Abu Jahl put this bounty out that whosoever, na'udhu billah, exterminates Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, kills him, will receive this bounty, will receive this reward. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu heard about this, and he approached Abu Jahl asking him that, what you're saying, is it actually true? Will you actually reward a person, na'udhu billah, for this job, for the carrying out of this job? And he wanted to find out whether he was genuine or not. So Abu Jahl replied in the affirmative that yes, if someone does this, then I will reward him this much XYZ amount of livestock or camels. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, upon hearing this, he set out immediately with sword in hand, to, na'udhu billah, kill Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. On his journey there, on his way there, he came across a group of people who were slaughtering an animal. When he saw this, he stood by and watched the animal being slaughtered, and he heard, right? This is a narration by Abu Nu'aym, which is narrated in Fath al-Bari. He heard that from the stomach of that animal, a voice coming and saying that this is a mighty successful affair. There is an individual who has proclaimed something with an eloquent tongue. He invites people to the testimony of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu himself says at the time he felt as if this message was for him. He felt as if I was the addressee of this message. So now when he hears this, despite hearing this, he still did not get away from he still did not stop his detestable task, but rather he continued. Soon after him continuing and going towards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he met someone. He met someone by the name of Nu'aym bin Abdullah. Nu'aym bin Abdullah asked Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, where are you off to in such a hurry? Where are you going? When he heard this, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu told him what he's going to do, right? And how he's going to go. What he's going on about. Nu'aym bin Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu said that once you do this task, once you eliminate Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what do you think his tribe will say? Over there in that time, there was a form of asabiyya, that a tribe would always stand up for their respective tribe members. They will not just take this lightly. If someone is harmed within the tribe, and someone has been done some form of wrong within a tribe, the respective tribe would immediately lash out, and there will be some type of battle or some type of quarrel that would go on for ages. So Nu'aym bin Abdullah radiallahu anhu asked him, how will you fare with Banu Hashim if they find out that you have done such a thing? Nu'aym bin Abdullah radiallahu anhu said this to Umar radiallahu anhu. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu said that it seems as if you have also become a Sabi. Sabi meaning someone who has left his faith. Sabi meaning someone who has left his faith. He has become irreligious. Someone who has abandoned their creed. Nu'aym bin Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, upon hearing this, replied that why are you accusing me? He says, why are you accusing me? Don't you know that your sister Fatima bint al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anha and your brother-in-law Sa'id bin Zayd radiallahu anhu have also turned away from their previous religion? Haven't you heard they have also renounced your ancestral religion in favor of Islam? Aren't you aware of this? Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, upon hearing this, because now it has just become a family matter. To him, it's become a family matter. He cannot just take this and just listen and just continue going. He storms over to his sister's home, Fatima bint al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anha's home. Upon reaching there, he knocks on the door furiously and very hard. As soon as he opens the door, there was an individual who was sitting with them and teaching them Quran al-Kareem, teaching them the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hearing the footsteps and hearing the coming of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, immediately got up and hid in another room. When Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu entered, he asked his sister whether this was true or not, asked his brother-in-law, and they replied in the affirmative, and rather they said, what if the religion we are upon now is better than the religion that we were upon before? Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu did not accept this. He started beating them furiously. And he struck his sister in the head so hard that it caused her to start bleeding profusely. Now, of course, we have to remember, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu had this personality. That was a force to be reckoned with. But we have to remember who's on the receiving end of this. If Umar radiallahu anhu has this personality, then of course the sister of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu would have something similar. So she exclaimed to Umar radiallahu anhu that what if what we're doing now is better than what we were doing before? After hearing this, Umar radiallahu anhu simmered down and he calmed down a little bit. Then his eyes fall upon the ayat of Surah Taha. He starts reading. But rather, before he starts, his sister tells him that you are not allowed to touch this. This is not for you to touch. But rather, you have to go perform ghusl. There's some different narrations. Some state that he had to go perform wudu, and he performed wudu. His sister told him to go perform wudu. Some state that he had to go perform a ghusl, take a bath, right? Depending on the conflicting narrations, he was told to go perform wudu or ghusl. Upon returning, he starts reciting the ayat of the Quran al-Kareem. And then he comes up to the ayah, verse number 16. إِنَّنِي أَنَا اللَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنَا فَاعْبُدْنِي وَأَقِيمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِي. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Innani ana Allah. Verily, I am Allah. I am your creator. La ilaha illa ana fa'budni. There's no creator besides me. Fa'budni, and worship me. Wa aqim as-salata li dhikri, and establish salah with my remembrance, due to my remembrance. After reading these verses of Surah Taha, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu turns to his sister and he says, take me to Muhammad, take me to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The person, remember, there's still a third person there. Khabbab radiallahu anhu, who was hiding in the other room, he comes out exclaiming that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam just made dua for you. He made dua for you. Now, subhanAllah, one very important lesson we can derive from this. Look at such a bitter enemy of Islam prior to accepting it. What changed his life? What changed his heart? What made him flip his entire mindset? Not due to dawah, not due to finding more about rational perspective of Islam, as many people do nowadays, right? But just by taking one glance, one look at the Quran al-Kareem, it changed his life forever. To a point about the merits of Umar radiallahu anhu, it comes that shaitan will never walk the same path as him. What changed him? The book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran al-Kareem changed him. It took only 16 verses of the Quran al-Kareem, short verses. As we know, Surah Taha, the very beginning of it, contains only short verses. Taha, ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'ana litashqa illa tadhkiratan liman yakhsha, so on and so forth. Right? Until the 16th verse changed his entire life around. He says, take me to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was taken by someone, or he went to the house of Arqam radiallahu anhu. At that time, it is stated that Arqam radiallahu ta'ala anhu's home was known as Darul Arqam, the home of Arqam. And this was known to be the first madrasa in Islam, the first place of knowledge and seeking knowledge in Islam. Sahaba radiallahu anhu would gather there just so that they can learn Islam and deen from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he approached, he knocked on the door and he asked permission to enter. At that time, when the Sahaba who were present were afraid to let him enter, were afraid to give him entrance or grant him permission to come in. In different narrations, it comes what was said, but Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, if he is here to accept Islam, then it's a good fortune. But if not, then we will kill him with his own sword. If he's here to cause some type of mayhem, some type of chaos, then we'll kill him with his own sword. But if he's here to accept Islam, that's a good thing. Upon entering, Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu was taken by two people by his hand, and he was taken to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam granted him permission. When the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sat in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, say la ilaha illallah, accept Islam through these words. Bear testimony that Allah is one and I am his messenger. Then Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, on the spot, he accepts Islam. He accepts Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's accepts Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a messenger, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one and true Allah. Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates, when Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu entered the fold of Islam, Jibreel alayhi salatu was salam ascended, and this is narrated in Ibn Majah and Imam Hakim rahimahullah ta'ala is a mustadrak, and both of them, they conclude that this hadith is authentic. When Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu accepted Islam and entered into the fold of Islam, Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam descended down to earth and he said, O Muhammad, coming to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and saying, O Muhammad, all the inhabitants of the heavens are overjoyed at the Islam of Umar radiallahu anhu. All the inhabitants of the heavens are overjoyed with the Islam of Umar radiallahu anhu. After Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the conclusion is, after Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu accepted Islam, he instantaneously heralded and he started to go and tell everyone about it. Started to go, as I mentioned, he was very loud and he was very vocal about him accepting Islam. To a point that when he went once into somewhere, when he started to tell people that he also accepted Islam, the group of people who were present, they unleashed a beating upon him. Right? They unleashed a beating upon him. And just for some context, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu accepted Islam between the first and second hijrah to Abyssinia. Between the first and the second migration to Abyssinia. So this is around the 6th year of prophethood. So when they started to beat him and when they started to harm him, Anas bin Wa'il, who was passing by at the time, he asked them, what is going on? What are you doing to him? They said that he's become a sabi, he's become irreligious, he's left his deen. So this is the consequence and the result of it. Anas bin Wa'il told them that stop. Don't do such a thing. Why are you going to harm someone who fancies another religion as opposed to yours? One thing that was very respected and well reserved within the city of Makkah Mukarramah was protection. This also was the case with Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when someone granted him protection, granted him asylum, that if a person who was well respected within the society granted asylum or protection to someone, then no one by any means was allowed to harm him. So Anas bin Wa'il granted Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu protection, and he said no one will harm him. Right? To a point, subhanAllah, this shows us the power of the Islam of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Inshallah, we'll end with this. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he was going to perform hijrah, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu went to the outskirts of Makkah, or rather, I'm getting mixed up whether it went to the Haram or whether it was to the outskirts of Makkah. He went there and he stated, and he made an announcement. He had a sword in his sheath, he had a bow and arrow on his back. He made an announcement, very, very vocal. He said, whoever would like that their wives become widows or their children become orphans, then come and face me. I am going to perform hijrah. If you want a piece of me, then come. If you want your wives to become widows or you want your children to become orphans, I am performing hijrah. Come and try to stop me. But do we really think anyone showed up? No. No one tried to challenge him. Right? So this Islam of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was a huge, huge deal for the Muslims. That the Muslims who were once not allowed to pray in the Haram and worship in the Haram were now able to do that. We're now able to openly practice their deen. We're now able to openly peacefully practice their Islam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to have this reverence for the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and also may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to have this level, like the amount of robe and the amount of awe that Umar radiallahu ta'ala had about his deen, had of his deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also put that in our hearts as well. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.